Hi everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Today I'd like to cover one of the more popular motorcycle segments out there today, and that is the adventure touring segment. But specifically for this video, I'm going to focus on the mid-size adventure touring bikes with engine displacements from 600 to 1000 cc. I got this idea by seeing a recent review of Bike Magazine of 7 motorcycle models that fit this segment. So I'll give you my thoughts on each of these 7 bikes, plus I'll provide some information on additional bikes that I think should have been included in this category during their review. Now here's a list of the bikes that I'll be focusing on in this video. We have the Ducati Desert X, the Triumph Tiger 900 GT, Moto Guzzi V85 TT Travel, Yamaha Tenere 700, Husqvarna Norden 901, the Aprilia Touareg 660, Ducati Multistrada V2, and then I've added some of my own here: Kawasaki KLR 650, Kawasaki Versys 650, and the Suzuki V-Strom 650. I've got a couple of additions that I'll mention too later in the video. There seems to be 2 main trends that are leading to the growth of this class of motorcycles. The first trend is the increasing popularity of adventure-style motorcycles, and the second trend is the move towards smaller, mid-sized engine displacement as compared to the earliest entries into the adventure touring segment. I think these trends make sense for several reasons. I used to own a Ducati Multistrada. It was a 2016. I thought that bike was a little too big and too heavy and too expensive with lots of exposed plastic to really be considered much of an off-road motorcycle. Plus today's V4 Multistradas are pushing $30,000 in price. Even the more modest V2 variant with 939cc engine displacement is $18,000. And to me, the same can be said about the granddaddy of adventure-style bikes, and that is the BMW GS 1250. I know there are some who take this bike on some pretty hardcore off-road routes, but given the chance, who wouldn't prefer a smaller, lighter, and less expensive alternative if they truly use the bike for more off-road than, say, on-road purposes? All the bikes that I cover today have an MSRP of $9,000 to $18,000. I also did some data analytics for the key statistics for each of these motorcycles that will identify some of the overall trends and correlations among the various models in this segment. I did this analysis because frankly it seemed to me rather confusing to try and figure out all the differences among these bikes, not just from one brand to the other, but even within a given brand, such as looking at all the adventure touring motorcycles offered by Triumph alone as an example. I will cover over 13 adventure style motorcycles in this video that are in the 600 to 1000 cc engine range. I will cover the pricing, the key features of the bike. I'll show you a graphic for the key specifications, and as I mentioned, I'll show you how the analytics shook out. I'll start out by covering what is arguably one of the more exciting new middleweight entries into the adventure touring segment, and that's the Ducati Desert X. This bike has an MSRP of $17,095. It has a 937cc V-twin engine, and it comes with long travel adjustable suspension. This bike is considered to be many to be the best bike in this segment. However, it is the most expensive bike, and we'll see later on in the analytics that I compiled that it may not represent the best value depending on your priorities. For the price, it's surprising that the bike doesn't come standard with a luggage rack, heated grips, or a center stand, nor does it come with an adjustable seat height. One of the cooler features though is the ability to add an 8-liter auxiliary fuel tank to the back of the bike. This will increase fuel capacity from 5.5 to 7.7 gallons and will increase the typical fuel range for this bike from about 240 to 350 miles. Next up we have the Triumph Tiger 900 GT. Now I have to say Triumph may have gone a bit overboard with the number of models and model variations in this 600 to 1000 cc segment, but that's just my initial reaction. An interesting thing about all the Triumph adventure bikes is that they have an inline triple engine. For just the Tiger 900, Triumph offers 4 model variations with the GT, GT Low, GT Pro, and GT Rally. The Triumph GT Low offers a 2-inch lower seat height at 30.3 inches as compared to the standard GT model. Either one of these models retails for $14,700. For a bit more money, you can get a more advanced chassis with the GT Rally or GT Pro models. These models are priced at $15,400 and $16,600 respectively. As I mentioned, in the 600cc to 1000cc engine size, Triumph also offers the Tiger Sport 660 for $9,500 and the Tiger 850 Sport for $12,000. So really you have a lot of options when it comes to price and horsepower within their model line. Next we have the V85 TT Travel from Moto Guzzi. According to Bike Magazine, this bike offers a lot of character or soul compared to the adventure style models offered by others, and may be better suited for long distance trips, particularly on pavement. To that end, it has the highest fuel range in stock configuration at 278 miles. Also, its MSRP of $13,400 puts it near the middle of the price range of these types of bikes. I don't know that an opposed V-twin engine is the best choice for doing any intense off-road riding due to the exposed cylinder heads, and it doesn't seem that Ducati offers cylinder head guards for this bike as, say, you would have on a BMW GS bike. I would say another potential limiting factor for someone considering the Moto Guzzi might be the distance they have to go to find a dealer, as there just aren't that many in North America alone. But also the same could be said for the Aprilia and Husqvarna that we're going to cover here in a bit. I really like the fact that the Moto Guzzi has shaft drive. I really also like its looks. Next up we have the Yamaha Tenere 700. This is a 689cc parallel twin motorcycle that has an MSRP of $10,500 and has been immensely popular since its introduction in 2019. This bike ticks all the boxes for off-road prowess. One thing it lacks, however, is cruise control. Now this bike, the Husqvarna Norden 901, may be one of the more interesting bikes in this midweight adventure segment. It certainly looks different from any other bike in this segment. Underneath, the bike is basically a KTM 890 Adventure. Aside from the difference in looks and slightly lower MSRP at $14,000, the advantage that this bike has is its higher level of power at 105 horsepower, also its higher level of torque at 74 foot-pounds. Next is the Aprilia Touareg 660. This is a 659cc parallel twin bike that occupies the middle ground for this group of bikes with an MSRP of $12,000. It also has more power at 79 horsepower than the other sub 700cc bikes. Apparently some reviewers of this bike think it seems to lack when it comes to long distance touring on pavement, mostly because of its relatively thin seat. Next up is the Ducati Multistrada V2. I have to say, when this model was introduced a few years ago, I just didn't understand why people wouldn't simply opt for the 1260cc Multistrada, which had about the same weight and seat height. The answer to that question, I suppose, is that other Multistradas moved to the V4 configuration, and now many other manufacturers offer a true mid-size touring bike. Now, this bike is the most expensive in this group of adventure bikes at $17,900 if you get it with the touring package. Now, these last three mid-size touring motorcycles were not listed in the Bike Magazine article, but arguably they should have been. These are the Kawasaki 650 Versys, the Suzuki 650 V-Strom, and the Kawasaki KLR 650. The Kawasaki 650 Versys has been around for many years, and the current models range in price from $8,000 to $10,000. The $10,000 price tag is for the hard saddlebag configuration. The Suzuki V-Strom 650 has also been around for several years. It ranges in price from $9,000 to $10,000 with hard saddlebags. And finally, you have the venerable KLR 650 from Kawasaki that they recently reintroduced. The MSRP for the ABS version of this bike is $7,000. Hard saddlebags will raise the price by just $500. Now, I see this bike on a continuum of adventure touring as more off-road focused as compared with doing a majority of the riding on pavement, but it's definitely a very good machine. So after running through each of these models' major features, let's see how they compare to each other relative to major aspects of their specifications by generating some plots. Let's look at the list price versus horsepower chart. You see a definite trend showing that the bikes with the higher sales price offers more horsepower. The Ducati Desert X and V2 Multistrada are at 110 and 113 horsepower respectively. The lower bound price and horsepower plot is for the KLR 650. We see a similar trend of increasing torque with increasing sales price, with the outlier being the Husqvarna Norden 901 on the plus side at 74 foot-pounds. As you can see, there's also a correlation with increasing ground clearance with increasing seat height, but this correlation isn't as strong as it was with price and horsepower and price and torque. You also see something interesting when you plot horsepower versus engine size with two main clusters of bikes. You can also see that there's a gap in bikes around the 750cc to 825cc engine displacement. This gap will be filled by the introduction of new models such as the 776cc parallel twin V-Strom 800DE. Pricing hasn't been announced yet for this bike. Or another bike that could fit nicely in this gap is the Honda XL 750 Transalp. This bike comes with a 755cc parallel twin engine, which Honda says is good for 91 horsepower. My next plot is a fuel mileage divided by horsepower, and you can see that the Kawasaki KLR 650 is the most efficient and the V2 Multistrada is the least efficient. Next, we have the chart of power to weight ratio for each bike. The highest power to weight ratios are for the Ducati Desert X, V2 Multistrada, and Husqvarna Norden 901. The bike with the lowest power to weight ratio is the Kawasaki KLR 650. Finally, we plotted motorcycle price divided by horsepower rating, which shows that the Norden, Versys, and V-Strom bikes with the lowest ratio of $134 per horsepower. So I think plotting these key specification values helped me understand the differences and overall trends among all of these bikes in the mid-size adventure touring segment. It's also worth pointing out that all of these bikes come with riding modes, except for the Tenere, Versys 650, and V-Strom 650. Obviously, other less tangible items such as looks, feel, and riding position of the bike have to factor into the decision-making process as well. The other thing you might look at if you're really looking into off-road applications is whether the ABS and traction control can be turned off on a given model. But again, I think the most important thing to consider in trying to figure out which of these bikes would be the best fit is to figure out which percentage of your riding is going to be on pavement versus off-road. This could influence additional factors you may want to consider in shopping for a bike, such as front wheel size. For example, a 21-inch wheel would provide more capability than a 19-inch wheel for riding over logs or other obstacles off-road. But those large diameter wheels will limit some of the handling performance on pavement. Another factor you may want to examine is whether the bike has tubed or tubeless tires. Many of the off-road focused bikes have spoked rather than cast wheels for greater impact resilience. Spoked wheels often have an inner tube, but that's not always the case. Now, as I was wrapping up production for this video, I realized that there are at least two other bikes that could have been included in this category. For example, the Yamaha Tracer 9 GT and the BMW F850 GS. Yamaha lists the Tracer on their website under the sport touring category for some reason, even though it looks like an adventure style bike to me. But, it's got cast wheels, and I suppose this bike really is for someone who likes the adventure style looks and riding position, but has zero plans to do any off-pavement riding. But the bike that should definitely be considered in the mid-size adventure touring category is the BMW F850 GS. And I don't know why this wasn't included in the Bike Magazine review. This bike has a base price of $12,600, but you can certainly option it out to over $18,000. This bike is really nice and compact with its inline parallel engine. It's probably in some respects the best overall bike in this category of mid-size adventure touring motorcycles. So let's go back to my analytics briefly to see how the BMW stacks up against the other bikes. Let's look at price for horsepower. Let's assume a sort of mid-level configuration of this bike at $15,500 and 90 horsepower. So it's going to put you here in this portion of the plot for the 850 GS. And then looking at the torque plot at 63 horsepower, it puts you very close to what you have for the Tiger 900 GT. Now, if we look at seat height and ground clearance, 33.9 inch seat height and a ground clearance of 9.8 inches. So up here. And then horsepower versus engine size, 853 cc at 90 horsepower, puts you up here. And if we look at efficiency, miles per gallon divided by horsepower for the BMW, it's about 0.61. So right in here. And if we take the 90 horsepower and divide by the 504 pound running weight, we get a power to weight ratio of 0.17. So up here. And finally, if we look at MSRP divided by horsepower, take the 15,500 divided by 90, we're at $172 per horsepower. So in line with the Moto Guzzi and the KLR 650. So pretty high price per horsepower. I generally don't like to speculate about what may be coming as future models or model variants, but I'll have to say that I think it's likely that Harley-Davidson will release a version of their Pan America Adventure Touring motorcycle that uses the same 975cc liquid-cooled Revolution Max engine that's in their Nightster. You know, that same engine was slated to be in the Street Fighter, the Bronx, before they axed that. Some people think that that Bronx is going to be released. I don't know if that bike's ever going to see the light of day. It seems to make more sense, given what Harley's been doing, is to get in here in this mid-size touring segment with their Pan America variant. I think that if Harley released such a bike and priced it under $15,000 and could get their reliability issues squared away that they've been having with the 1250 Pan America, that it could compete very well within this segment. Well, there you have it. Which of these bikes appeal most to you? Please let me know in the comments section. Also, please hit those subscribe and notification buttons, and please stay tuned for future videos.